What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I am here to talk to you about an X-Men book that I recently finished reading. Extraordinary X-Men, Volume 1, X-Haven. This is issues 1 through 5 of the Extraordinary X-Men series that came out after Marvel's 2015 Secret Wars event. It is written by Jeff Lemire, and it is drawn by Humberto Ramos. Let me go ahead and talk about the artwork really quickly, because usually I forget to do that whenever I'm talking about books like this. I don't really like Humberto Ramos' artwork very much. Sometimes I like it a lot. The time I think that it worked the most for me was Mark Waid's Impulse run from the 90s. I thought that Ramos's anime style really worked well for that character in that series. But then you look at a series like this, some of the characters that he draws, they look really cool, and it works really well the way that he draws them. Some of the others, it doesn't work very well at all. For example, Ramos draws Wolverine's claws about half the length that they should be. Most artists tend to draw Wolverine's claws coming out about like this. Ramos has them coming out about like that. He looks much less threatening when you shorten his claws like that. Even though it makes sense that his claws shouldn't be longer than his hand, still, that's what most artists tend to draw Wolverine looking like. So he looks a lot less menacing whenever you draw him that way. And it's really distracting to me when almost everyone draws his claws as being about 12 inches long, and then Ramos draws them as being about 4 inches long. That's just really weird. But then also Mr. Sinister shows up in this book, and Mr. Sinister has got this diamond thing on his forehead. Well, Ramos draws it so that takes up about like half of his head, and it looks really goofy the way Ramos draws him. And there's some characters here I really liked it, like I said, and then there's other characters I was really thinking Ramos needed to take a few more passes at that character before he put that down on the final page. So overall, I wasn't really feeling Ramos's artwork here. It's not the worst art I've ever seen, but I personally wasn't really digging it. Moving on to the story itself. Unfortunately, this book feels like it's mostly just intro to the actual series. This is 5 issues long. It takes 3.5 issues to get the team together so that we can actually start telling stories in this series. And that is unacceptable when the X-Men have been around for over 50 years. If you're creating a brand new superhero team, I can kind of understand how it might take you a little while to get your team together. But this is a group of characters who have been around for many decades. I don't think any of these characters are very new characters. They've all been around for longer than I've been alive. So it's pretty much unacceptable that it would take that long to get all of these characters on the same team. You've got Magic, Storm, and Iceman. They are all staff at the school, I guess the Jean Grey school, they just call it the school, and they are saying, well, we need to recruit some people. We need to have an actual X-Men team. So then Magic goes to recruit Colossus, and then they go to find Nightcrawler, and then Iceman and Storm, they try to get Teen Jean from the past, and that doesn't work too well, and then they wind up encountering Old Man Logan from an alternate future, and then Teen Jean convinces Old Man Logan to join them, and then by the end of issue 4, they're all on the same team, and then they're fighting the bad guy. That is way too long for a group of superheroes to take to join forces. Or, if you are going to take that long to have a group of characters join forces, you need to actually have some story stuff happening along the way while they are taking that long to get together. And that's not happening here. For the first 3.5 issues, it's just characters talking to each other about, hey, I know the world sucks right now, but you need to join the X-Men. That's all that it is for the first 3.5 issues. The last issue and a half, we do get some plot, but it feels like an afterthought. It feels like it was just, okay, now that we've got the team thrown together, we need to have a bad guy in this book. What if it was Mr. Sinister? And unfortunately, what's really kind of stings here is that Mr. Sinister and his plan in this book is actually kind of interesting. Mr. Sinister has always been just the very boring, generic, mad scientist character. And here, mutant kind is dying out. So Mr. Sinister is actually kidnapping mutants and experimenting on them, trying to create a stronger, better, more resilient mutant. And that's a really cool idea. Mr. Sinister is a bad guy, so naturally his motivations are not going to be very pure, but if mutants all die out, then he's not going to have anybody to experiment on. So I really like this idea that Mr. Sinister, in his own twisted, sick way, is trying to save the mutant species. Unfortunately, he's only in this book for about an issue and a half, and he's not really explored very much at all. He's just kind of here so that this team can have a bad guy to fight in this volume. basically he doesn't really do anything other than fight the X-Men, and he talks about how he's trying to save the mutant species. I really wish that we could have had a little bit more of him talking about how he is trying to save the mutant race, and he is just going about it in a little bit more of a darker way than what is acceptable by human standards. Because most of the time with the X-Men, they work best when their villain is doing something that is kind of understandable and sympathetic. And I don't want to say that Sinister wanting to experiment on mutants is sympathetic, but if his ultimate endgame is saving the mutant species, that could have been interesting. Unfortunately, this book doesn't do anything with that. The other big thing that I really did not care about with this book is that it really just feels like Lemire is just repeating and rinsing and redoing what Bendis was doing on his run on mostly Uncanny X-Men, but a little bit of All New thrown in there too. Basically, we are seeing a lot of just the same straight-up plot points from Bendis' run show up here. Once again, there are no new mutants being born. It seems like the last 3 years of comics before this, you can just completely forget that those happened, because now the mutant species is once again stagnant. There are no new mutants coming about. This has something to do with the Inhuman Terrigen Mists. The Terrigen Mists are what give the Inhuman species their powers. Apparently, the Terrigen Mists now, they give mutants this disease that is killing them off, although we don't actually get to see any of that in action in this book, and B, it is making it so that there are no new mutants on planet Earth. It's weird that that's happening, since after House of M, Quicksilver used the Terrigen Crystals to try and repower some depowered mutants, and the Terrigen Crystals did not have that effect on mutants, so it's weird that it's having that effect now, but whatever, I guess I'll just let that slide. But anyway, so human beings, they hate mutants now more than ever because of something that Cyclops did. We're never told what it is. Apparently, there's going to be this series called The Death of X that's going to fill in this huge time gap that all these books skipped over after Secret Wars. So we're going to find out what all these characters are talking about. Every time they say, after everything that Cyclops did, humans hate mutants now more than ever. So once again, humans really, really hate mutants, and once again, mutants are dying off. Mutants are a minority once again. They're persecuted. A lot of this is stuff, if you talk about it really broadly and generically, a lot of this is stuff that has been going on in the X-Men comics for a really long time. But specifically, this feels like a lot of the same stuff that Bendis was working with. Bendis had the X-Men where a mutant, if they just show up in downtown somewhere, the police are just going to arrest that person just because they're a mutant. This book has, I think the Israeli or the Indian army, they are opening fire on a mutant because they're a mutant and that's the only reason. And so a lot of this just feels like it's kind of repeating some of the stuff that Bendis did. And since I wasn't a huge fan of what Bendis did, I'm tending to not like what Lemire is doing with Bendis' ideas. Now, I have been told by many people that this series gets better after this volume. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to say that I do not recommend this volume. I might give volume 2 a chance just because I assumed, before I talked to other people about this series, I assumed that it would get better after this volume because, like I said, this is mostly just intro for the actual stories. And so I was kind of thinking, well, surely the actual stories are going to be better than this. So I was thinking, okay, I'll probably get volume 2, but as far as just recommending this volume alone on its own merits, I don't. This does not have very many redeeming qualities to it. It's mostly just the characters joining forces, and it really shouldn't have taken that long for the characters to do that. So those are my thoughts on Lemire and Humberto Ramos's Extraordinary X-Men Volume 1, X-Haven. Next week, I'll be talking about another one of the post-Secret Wars X-Men books, so look forward to that. And I also do other videos throughout the week, so be sure to check those out also. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.